Ah, there you are again, still walking beside me. That pleases me more than I let on. You see, many people enjoy hearing words about virtue, about the soul, about truth. But very few enjoy the real work that comes next. They want answers, like figs handed to them from a stall. Sweet, simple, easy to swallow. But I ask you, have you ever seen a tree grow by being fed figs? No, it grows by digging into the earth. And that, my friend, is what a real question does. It digs. Now, you've heard me speak before. I am not a teacher. I am not a sophist. And I charge no coin. I ask questions. That is my only trade. In the Agora, I pass by men who boast of their wisdom, merchants who know the price of everything, generals who know how to command, orators who know how to stir a crowd. But when I ask, what is justice, or what is good, or even, what is a man, they bristle. They flinch, or worse, they answer too quickly. They believe the answer is the thing that matters. But the answer is not the treasure. The question is. An answer, once spoken, hardens. It becomes a shield. A question, if it is true, remains alive. It pierces, it unfolds, it grows. I ask you, when was the last time someone asked you a question that shook you? Not, how much do you earn? Not, do you agree with me? But a real question. One that left you standing silent. Not because you had nothing to say, but because you suddenly saw how much you had never considered. You see, there is a kind of question that makes the soul sit up, like a dog hearing a distant sound in the dark. I once asked a young man in the gymnasium, "What do you love most?" He grinned and said, "Victory, of course." And I asked, "Is victory always good?" He said, "Well, yes, it means I'm the best." So I said, "If you win by deceit, is that still good?" He frowned. "If your enemy surrenders in fear, is that still the best?" He hesitated. "If your friend loses everything, so you can win, is that still a triumph?" He was silent. That silence, friend, that moment, is where real learning begins. Not in being told, not in memorizing, but in being pierced by a question that cannot be ignored. The sophists, those smooth-tongued men in embroidered cloaks, they teach how to win arguments. They sell words like wine, intoxicating and fast. But I would rather lose 10 debates and find one truth than win 1,000 and still be empty. So today, let us speak not of what to say, but of what to ask, of how to ask, for the right question is a blade sharper than any spear. And the man who knows how to ask it, he walks with the gods. Come, let us begin. You've chosen to stay. That already makes you rarer than gold. Now let us speak plainly. Not all questions are equal. Some are like seeds. They grow in the soul and bear fruit for years. Others are like smoke. They swirl for a moment and vanish, leaving nothing behind. So what then makes a question right? Let us begin here. A right question is not clever. It is clear. The sophists, they ask riddles and call it wisdom. They twist words like a weaver working too fast, the threads crossing every which way. But a real question? A right question is clean, simple, like a spear, not a net. Let me show you. Suppose I ask, what is justice? That is a clear question. It seeks the nature of a thing. But if I say, don't you agree that justice is what benefits the strong? That is not a question. That is a trap. One invites truth. The other corners you. A right question does not try to win. It tries to uncover. There was a time, not long ago, when I stopped a well-dressed man outside the Acropolis. He wore a ring carved with a lion's head, and his cloak shimmered like fish scales. He was boasting of his wisdom, how he had studied with Anaxagoras and read every scroll in the library at Pergamon. So I asked him, "What is wisdom?" He laughed and said, "It is knowing many things." And I said, "If a man knows how to cheat dice, seduce wives, and avoid taxes, is he wise?" He frowned. "That is cunning," he said, "not wisdom." "Ah," I said, "so wisdom must be more than knowing. It must be knowing what is good to know." He nodded. "And who teaches us what is good?" I asked. "The poets? The city? The gods?" He hesitated. His cloak no longer shimmered quite so brightly. "That is what a right question does. It leads the listener not to my truth, but to his own soul's doorway. It invites him to knock. Now, a right question must also be specific. To ask what is good is too wide. It is like trying to drink the whole sea at once. But to ask, is courage always good, even when it leads to death? Now that can be swallowed and tasted and judged. A vague question is polite conversation. A specific one is a blade, clean, narrow, and sharp. But let me warn you. The right question must be honest. It must come from curiosity, not from pride. If you ask only to trap, or to boast, or to display your cleverness, you are not a philosopher. You are a juggler. I once saw a boy in the gymnasium mock an older man by asking, "What is the purpose of living, old one, if your knees creak and your teeth are few?" He thought himself clever, but I asked him, "Do you think the gods value your speed more than his wisdom? Would you rather be fast and foolish, or slow and true?" He said nothing more that day. That is the truth of it. Questions can either build or destroy, and the best ones build. They make space. They draw out. They breathe. You see, the Greeks have a word, maiutike. It means the art of midwifery. And I believe that good questions are like midwives. They help birth truth from within a soul that already carries it. When I speak to others, when I question them, I do not inject my knowledge into them like the sophists do. No, I draw out what was already waiting to be born. Sometimes it comes in pain. Sometimes in silence. But it comes. And you, if you would learn this art, must learn to ask not only with your tongue, but with your ears. For a right question requires true listening. You must follow the thread, not yank it, and know this. Not every question will land. Some will fall flat. Some will strike pride. Some will be swatted away like flies. But one question, one right question, can change a man's life. I once asked a friend, "What do you most fear losing?" He said, "My reputation." I asked, "If you lose your reputation but gain your soul, is that a loss?" He looked at me like I had slapped him. But later that month, when he was accused unjustly, he stood silent. He did not beg. He did not lie. He said, "Let the gods see my heart." That, my friend, was the fruit of a question planted weeks before. It grew quietly, and when the storm came, it bore strength. So I say to you now, if you would live the examined life, you must learn the art of asking. Ask clearly. Ask sincerely. Ask precisely. Do not seek to trap. Do not seek to win. Seek to know. Let your questions be lanterns, not spears. Let them lead you, and others, toward the soul. Let us sit a while, friend. This part cannot be rushed, for even the sharpest question, if asked with the wrong spirit, wounds more than it heals. Now, I've told you that the right question must be clear, but I must now tell you, more importantly, it must come from the right place. A question asked from pride is like wine poured into a cracked cup. It leaks truth before it can be tasted. So let me ask you now, when you question others, what do you seek? Do you seek to know, or to display what you already believe? Do you seek to understand, or to win? Be careful, my friend. The soul can be subtle in its deceptions. Even I, yes, even I, have sometimes asked not to learn, but to sting. I've seen a man boast of his wisdom, and I've cut him down with questions, not to help him, but because I was weary of his smugness. That is not philosophy. That is cruelty dressed in wisdom's cloak. A true question must come from humility. It must begin in the place where we say, I do not know. I wish to know. Teach me. You remember, do you not, what the oracle at Delphi said? No man is wiser than Socrates. I laughed when I heard it, for I knew, more deeply than any other, that I knew nothing, and that, perhaps, is why the gods chose me. Because I do not ask from a mountain. I ask from the dust, so ask always from that place, from the low place, the honest place, and you will find others respond in kind. Now there is something else. A right question must come not from conquest, but from care. Too many use questions like daggers. Don't you see how foolish you are? They ask. Isn't it obvious you're wrong? That is not dialogue. That is war. But I do not seek victory over men. I seek victory with them. Let me tell you a story. Once I spoke with a soldier. Broad shoulders, deep voice, the kind of man who speaks more with silence than words. He told me that courage was charging into battle without fear. I asked him, and if a man charges in recklessly, with no sense, no plan, is that courage? He said no. That was madness. Then must courage also include wisdom? He agreed. And if a man knows what is right, but runs from it, even though he fears nothing, is that courage? No, he said. That is cowardice. And so we shaped the idea together. Not me against him, but me with him, like two hands smoothing a piece of wet clay. And when we were done, he looked at me and said, I had not seen it that way before. That, my friend, is the joy of a question asked in the right spirit, not to humiliate, not to prove, but to invite. And the best questions do just that. They invite the soul to step forward, trembling but willing. Now there are two final things a right-spirited question must carry. The first is courage, for not all answers are easy. When you ask a true question, you must be ready to hear what you did not expect. You may learn you are wrong. You may discover something painful. In another, or in yourself. But the philosopher does not run from such things. We ask anyway. We listen anyway. For truth is not always kind, but it is always just. The second is love. Yes, love. Even in the hard question. Even in the cutting inquiry. Let there be love. Not sentimental softness, but deep concern for the soul of the one you question. Ask as if their life depends on it, because it does. There is a saying, the physician must wound to heal. I say the philosopher must disturb to awaken. But let it never be wounding for sport. Let it never be disturbing for pride. Ask to awaken, ask to lift, ask to cleanse. So the next time you speak to your neighbor, your son, your wife, a stranger beneath the olive tree, ask with a clean spirit. Not, how can I show I am right? But how can we find truth together? Not, how can I expose your foolishness? But What are you longing to say that no one has ever helped you find the words for? That is what philosophy is, friend. Not victory, but midwifery, bringing forth what already waits inside. And that, I promise you, requires more tenderness than any soldier's hand. Come, let us keep walking. There is more to learn. Now that we've walked through the heart, let us speak of the hands. You've heard me speak of Elenchus, the method by which I examine men's beliefs. It is not a weapon. It is not a trick. It is a craft, like a sculptor chipping away what does not belong, or a midwife helping a child into the light. So I use Elenchus to draw truth from a soul. Would you learn it? Then listen carefully. The process begins with something simple. Agreement. You must start from something the other believes to be true. Not something you declare, but something they already carry in their heart. Suppose I meet a man in the Agora who says, "Justice means obeying the law." Very well, we begin there. Then I ask questions, not to destroy, but to test, to see whether that belief can hold its own weight. So I say to him, "Are all laws just?" And he may answer, "Yes, of course, otherwise they would not be law." Then I ask, "But if the assembly passed a law tomorrow to enslave all foreigners, would that be just?" He frowns. "No, that would be wrong." "So," I say, "a law can be unjust." He hesitates. "Yes, I suppose it can." "Then justice cannot simply be obeying the law, can it?" And now, you see, we have arrived at the first crack. This is not humiliation. This is not a game. This is a soul discovering it has built its house on sand, and now wishes to find stone. That is Elenchus. We begin with a belief. We question it. We test it against reason, example, contradiction, and we refine it, or replace it. Let me give you another example. A young man, son of a general, once told me, "Courage is never feeling fear." I asked him, "Do you think a man who charges into battle, heedless of danger, is courageous?" "Yes," he said, "that's bravery." "And what if he charges because he is drunk or mad?" "Well," he said, "perhaps that's not courage." So then, I asked, must courage include some sense, some wisdom, some awareness of the danger? "Yes, I think so," he replied. "Then is courage the absence of fear, or the mastery of it?" He was silent. Then he whispered, "The mastery." And there, friend, we had moved from an idea given to him by the crowd to an idea born within his soul. That is the power of the method. It does not give. It draws forth. But remember this. You must walk with the other, not ahead of him. Do not sprint while he limps. You must let the contradictions reveal themselves. Do not shout, "See? You're wrong." Ask one more question, and another, and let him see it. It is far better for a man to arrive at the truth than to be dragged to it. Now, some will resist, some will become angry. I've had men spit on me, shout, walk away red-faced. Why? Because I robbed them of the illusion that they already knew. But others, the brave, the honest, the rare, they lean in. They ask, "Then what is justice, Socrates?" And we begin again. So let me teach you the pattern. Find the belief. Ask, what do you believe about this thing? Justice, courage, love, piety? Clarify it. Ask, do you mean this or that? Help them state it clearly. Test it. Ask, are there exceptions, contradictions, situations where this belief fails? Expose or refine. Say, so if that's true, what follows? Follow the path until it reaches either contradiction or clarity. Start again, not with smugness, but with wonder. And do not be afraid to say, I don't know. I say it often. It keeps me honest. This method, this elenchus, it is not just for others. Use it on yourself. When you say, I must succeed, ask, why? What is success? Is it money, praise, or something deeper? Ask, test, refine. That is how the soul is sharpened. A man once said to me, Socrates, you never answer, only ask. I laughed and said, then let us both ask, and see if an answer comes. Come, friend, pick up this chisel of the soul. The method is yours, now. Use it well. By now, you may feel proud. You've learned the form. You've tasted the rhythm. You've seen how a question, rightly used, can shake a soul loose from its slumber. But take care. Many who walk this road trip on the same stones. Let me show them to you. Not to shame, but to guard you. The first mistake is this: asking too broadly. It sounds noble, lofty, to ask, what is goodness? Or, what is the meaning of life? But these questions are like tossing a net across the whole sea. You catch nothing. You only tire yourself out. Better to ask, is helping a friend still good? Is it meaningful to sacrifice one's life for a lie? Start small, start specific. Truth grows from the roots, not the clouds. The second mistake, asking to confirm, not to learn. Beware the man who asks questions only to hear his own echo. He does not seek knowledge, he seeks applause. I once heard a young orator stand in the Agora and ask, don't we all agree that Athens is the greatest city, the freest city, the most virtuous? He paused only long enough for the crowd to cheer. That is not a question. That is bait. Such men are not philosophers. They are merchants selling pride. A true question risks being wrong. It opens the door and does not know what walks through it. The third mistake, asking to trap. Now this is more cunning. I have seen men, especially the clever, ask questions like hunters laying snares. So you say you're just... Then why did you do this? So you claim to be wise. Why did you fail there? They are not seeking truth. They are seeking blood. Even some of my own students, bright, sharp-eyed, have fallen into this. They saw my questions cut through hypocrisy and thought, yes, let me wield that blade. But they forget. I do not swing to wound. I slice so something deeper may live. A trap question, like a trap law, always ends in violence. It leaves the soul broken, not awakened. The fourth mistake, asking without listening. Too many rush from question to question, not waiting, not weighing, not watching the soul before them. They speak as if questions are arrows to be fired in quick succession. But the philosopher waits, watches, lets silence stretch, until the other begins to speak truths they didn't know they held. You must ask with your ears open. A question is a doorway. Don't rush to slam it shut. The fifth mistake, using questions to avoid responsibility. Now this one is subtle. I've known men who ask endlessly, what is good? What is justice? What is love? And yet they never act. They question and question and question. Not to grow wise, but to delay choosing. They use questions like a man uses fog to hide. Do not become one of them. A question is not a shield forever. Eventually, you must step through it into the world. If you have asked what courage is, then be courageous. If you have asked what is just, then act justly. Otherwise, you are not a philosopher. You are a coward dressed in curiosity. I say all this not to scold, but because I have made these mistakes myself. When I was young, I asked to sound wise. When I grew bolder, I asked to test men. Only later did I learn to ask like a farmer, tending a field he does not yet understand, but longs to see bear fruit. So ask, but ask cleanly. Ask with stillness behind your words. Ask as if the soul before you, even your own, is a sacred thing, not a riddle to be solved. And when you fall, when you ask poorly, sharply, or proudly, do not despair. Stop, reflect, ask again, better. That is the way of it. This art is not learned all at once. It is practiced, lived, shaped over a lifetime. Even now, as I grow old, I catch myself in the middle of a question and wonder, is this for truth or for pride? And when I do, I pause, I wait, and I begin again. That, my friend, is how the soul becomes wise. Let us walk on. We are nearly there. Ah, but talk of method and spirit only goes so far. Let me show you now, not with ideas, but with stories. For I have walked these streets of Athens for many years, barefoot on the sun-warmed stones, my cloak stained with dust, my tongue sharp with questions. And in that time, I have met every sort of man, the powerful, the poor, the clever, the cruel, the curious. Each one a chance to ask, each one a chance to awaken something. Let me tell you of a few. One morning I found myself near the steps of the Bouleuterion, where the council meets to debate the laws. There stood a politician, robes fine, chin lifted, surrounded by men nodding like reeds in the wind. I stepped forward and said, "Tell me, friend, what is justice?" He smiled, the way a man smiles before delivering a speech he's practiced 100 times. "Justice," he said, "is giving each man what he deserves." "A fine answer," I said. "And who decides what each man deserves?" He faltered. "The laws, of course." "Ah," I said, "and if the laws are written by fools, or cowards, or tyrants, do they still decide what is just?" His smile cracked. "No, then the law is unjust." "So, if justice depends on who writes the laws, then it is not law alone that makes justice, but something deeper." "Yes?" He said nothing, but his hand dropped from his chest to his side. He had come to speak. Instead, he listened. "That is the power of a question well placed, not to embarrass, but to reveal a man to himself." Later that same day, I passed through the marketplace, where the air smells of figs, fish, and sweat. A merchant I had questioned once before called out, "Socrates, still asking your clever little puzzles?" I smiled and said, "Still counting your coins, friend." He laughed. "You may have your questions. I'll take my gold." So I said, "Tell me, does a man who cheats his neighbor to gain gold profit or lose?" "He profits," the man said. "Gold is gold." "But if he loses his honor in the eyes of the gods, has he gained?" he scoffed. "The gods do not weigh coin." "No," I said, "but they weigh the soul. And it seems to me the scale tips differently than yours." He turned away, muttering, but a young boy at his stall stood staring at me. And when I passed again 2 days later, the boy asked, "Socrates, what does it mean to be honest?" I knelt and said, "It means acting rightly, even when no one is watching, even when you lose silver for it." He nodded, and I saw that my question, cast at the Father, had struck the Son. That, too, is the work. One evening, near the gates, I met a hoplite, young, proud, his armor polished like a mirror. He said, "Socrates, you question cowards and merchants. But would you question a man who stands in battle?" I said, "Of course." "Tell me, What is courage? He laughed. Courage is never retreating. So if your general orders a retreat to save your army, and you refuse, is that courage or pride? He blinked. And if you run headlong into the enemy, not from duty, but from anger, is that courage or madness? He looked down at the hilt of his sword. Then I asked, Tell me truly, when you fought last, were you afraid? He hesitated. Yes. Yet you fought anyway. He nodded. Then I say you know more of courage than any man who pretends to feel no fear. He did not speak again, but he offered me his water skin, and that was more eloquent than words. Lastly, let me tell you of a woman, a widow who ran a small oil shop behind the temple of Hephaestus. One day, I saw her weeping after a dispute with a rival vendor. I asked her, Why do you cry? She said, Because he lies and cheats, and still people believe him more than me. And I said, Tell me, is your grief from the lie, or from the loss of others' praise? She froze. Then she said, Both. So I asked, Which is more precious, your honesty or their approval? She whispered, My honesty. Then perhaps, I said, you have lost nothing of worth. She looked at me, as if I had lifted a stone from her chest. Sometimes the right question is not loud. Sometimes it is quiet, like a hand placed gently on a shoulder. These stories are not meant to impress you. They are meant to remind you. Every soul you meet, on the street, in the bath, at the table, carries a hidden belief they have never questioned. You may be the one who helps them open it, not by shouting, not by winning, but by asking, carefully, honestly, from love. Come, let us finish what we've begun. You have walked far, friend, farther than most, and so now let us pause, not to stop, but to gather what has grown. We have asked, we have tested, we have cut away what is false. Now, what remains? What are the fruits of honest questioning? Let me name them for you. First, clarity. When you begin to ask rightly, the world begins to clear. Like morning fog lifting from the Acropolis, you begin to see, not just what things are, but why they are. You look at justice, and no longer mistake it for revenge. You look at love, and no longer confuse it with need. Your own heart, your own actions, your own choices. They come into focus. Clarity is not comfort. It is not always pleasant, but it is light. And in light, the soul grows. Second, integrity. Each question, rightly asked, peels back a layer of falsehood. You stop saying what others wish to hear. You stop doing what earns applause. You begin instead to speak and live from what you have tested. And in that, you become whole. Not perfect, not beyond error, but honest, inward and outward. There is no greater armor in this life than a soul that does not lie to itself. Third, direction. When you ask rightly, you begin to know where to walk. You do not follow every sophist with a silver tongue. You do not bow to every fashion of the crowd. You find your path, because you have asked what you value, and what is worth pursuing, and what is worth sacrificing. Even if you stumble, you will stumble toward something real. Fourth, true companionship. Ah, and this one. This fruit is sweet indeed, for when you begin to ask rightly, you begin to attract others who do the same. You will find, here and there, those who do not speak to impress, but to understand, who do not fear your questions, but welcome them. These are your companions, more precious than gold, rarer than rubies. And when you sit with them, when your questions meet theirs, the room becomes a temple. That, too, is philosophy. Fifth, peace. Not the peace of ignorance, not the sleep of the unexamined life, but the peace of a soul that no longer runs. You no longer need to pretend. You no longer need to hide. You know your flaws, and face them. You know your strengths, and use them rightly. You live truthfully. Even when the winds howl, even when the world mocks, you are steady. Because you have done the work. Now, let us end as we began. Not with a speech, but with a question. One final question to place in your hand, like a lantern for the road ahead. Tell me, what is the question you are most afraid to ask yourself? Not the question you ask others. Not the one you debate over wine or at the assembly. The one that keeps tugging at the corner of your soul. The one you avoid by keeping busy, by growing loud, by laughing too often at shallow things. That question, that is the one that will free you. And now I ask, will you ask it? Tonight? Not in a scroll, not in a symposium, but in the silence of your own heart. Ask it, sit with it, let it burn. And when the answer comes, let it not end the search, but deepen it. That is the path. That is the gift. That is philosophy. Now go, not to escape the world, but to live in it more truthfully than ever before. And remember, the unexamined question leads to the unexamined life. But one true question can awaken a soul. Ask it, then ask again.